What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. Great night of games in the association last night. Too many to even watch, but the ones we did watch, the ones we're going to talk about today, were phenomenal, and they brought lots of storylines. I'm the host, Adam Mares, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Legler. Legs, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. I mean, full slate. Sometimes it's hard to flush these games out, but we had the games that I focused on last night, and we're going to get into them. What I was so impressed with, it's one of the few times this year I felt like I watched multiple games and all of the teams, whether it was 3 games I'm talking about, 6 teams, all played with the same level of intensity.
Right.
All these games were hard fought games. They were important games. They were barometer games. For the most part, guys were playing, and they were playing hard. And so it was a great night in the league, really great night in the league. Some good finishes, some good individual performances, and more than anything, just tough physical basketball, which I loved watching.
100% was. I like you said, barometer, measuring stick games for sure. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with Thunder and Timberwolves. We're going to move on to Nuggets and Bucks. And then we're going to finish with the Cavs and the Clippers. So all 3 good teams, good matchups, good games. But first, we're presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code ALLNBA, because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. All right, let's start with the rematch between the Timberwolves and the Thunder. The last time these two teams met about 2 weeks ago, the Thunder went into Minnesota and got a very hard-fought win. It felt like a message game, getting a win on Minnesota's home court, climbing closer in the standings. This was the rematch, and it had the same intensity, the same sort of, I don't want to say bad blood, because I don't think it's anything personal between these two teams, but definitely you feel like these two teams are vying for the same crown, the young team that is ascending to the top of the standings. But this time, Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves come out with a win to get payback. What stood out to you, Tim, in this game?
No, I agree. I think it's, which one of these teams wants to kind of move from the kids' table, right, to the big table with the teams that we talk about that we think have a legitimate shot to win it. And I'm so impressed with both of them all year. I have been.
Same.
I want there to get, more of like there to be some more chippiness and animosity to grow. That's how you develop a great rivalry. And these two teams, they could be poised to get there for the next, few years, the way that they're set up. And that would be nothing better for the league than if that were to happen. This was just a back and forth game, every possession, hard fought. I'm going to start with Oklahoma City, and I'll challenge anybody out there that's watching this right now. If you didn't see the game and you have an opportunity to go and watch it or watch the condensed version or the highlight, whatever, more than the highlights, because you're not going to catch it all. I don't know about you, but I thought that was about as tough a 37 points that you're going to see a guy get and work for in this league. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was beyond sensational. I don't have another word really for it. Sensational doesn't cover it, Adam, because he was think about what's thrown at him initially, whether it is Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. These are 3 super athletic, long, tough, want-to type defenders. So you got to deal with that first. And that's pretty much right over half court. And you're getting hounded and you're getting harassed. And, the amount of dribbling he had to do to just stay on balance and stay in his zone of where he wanted to attack. And then guess what? If you get by that, you got Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert standing back there waiting for you, Naz Reid's of the world. That's what's on the second line. And he still had 37 on 18 field goal attempts. I just thought it was one of the best individual offensive performances I've seen this year. And take the 60s and 70s out of the mix. When I'm talking about a normal night for guys to have a great game, this is one of the best you'll see to keep his team in it offensively. Got a lot of help from Jalen Williams, but Beyond that, it was a struggle, I thought, for Oklahoma City, and did not have enough guys really included that stepped up and did timely things. Minnesota had much more of that on the other end. They had some role players make big plays for them down the stretch of this game, where you felt like for OKC, it was going to really 100% fall in the lap of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and that's just very difficult to do time after time against a team this good defensively.
It was such a fun matchup to watch. Shai is the third leading scorer in the NBA this year. You've got Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, and then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And tonight, to your point, I thought what stood out to me was how good Minnesota was defensively. I mean, we know that, but watching them defend, and then you go to the box score and you see that he basically averaged 2 points per shot, 37 points on 18 shooting attempts is incredible. And they were of all types, his mid-range, his step back, but he's so slippery. He also gets to the rim, 2-3 guys going at him, Gobert stepping up, Jaden McDaniels playing behind him, and he finds a way to slither between them and find the gaps to get these layups on angles that is just so impressive. So that stood out to me. But what really stood out to me was the other end, was just the defense. I mean, McDaniels, and I got to feel good about my guy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. No Mike Conley in this game. He closes at point guard. And that fourth quarter, we've talked about it on the show a lot. The Thunder have that 1-2 punch in the fourth quarter where they can throw out these different lineups. The Timberwolves swallowed that up in the fourth quarter, and it was impressive. And I thought that McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and obviously Gobert, they just shined so much in that fourth quarter with their ability to just make every possession an absolute dogfight for the Thunder. They scored 24 points, but to your point, they were all spectacular. Nothing came easy for the Thunder in the fourth, and I was so impressed with what the Timberwolves did defensively.
Yeah, and there were only two guys on Oklahoma City's team that looked up for the challenge, and it's the two guys we talk about all the time, right? And we talk about Chet a lot too. Chet had a bad game offensively; he just was a non-factor offensively. And I thought Towns and Gobert really bullied him around a little bit on the other end of the floor. I thought Karl Anthony Towns played a really smart game. He didn't shoot particularly great, but he took it to him. Gobert took it to him when he got opportunities to catch the ball deep or get it off the offensive glass. And they used his lack of, bulk and brawn against him. He couldn't really hold a spot as well against those guys in this game. He still had a couple of great blocks early in the game, but he was a non-factor offensively. I thought, Dort was horrendous. 0 for 7, could not make an open shot to save his life. Giddey had a string of like 3 threes in the first half and then completely disappeared in the second half of the game. So that's 3 of your starters right there that really just gave you nothing offensively in the second half of this game. And it fell on 2 guys' shoulders. And that's really tough against a team that's this good defensively in Minnesota. It's that athletic on the perimeter with that kind of size behind it. It's rare. I mean, I don't think another team in the league has quite the makeup of the Minnesota Timberwolves defensively. So give OKC credit. Look, on a night when those guys didn't play well offensively, the supporting cast, you're right there. I mean, you're in a one-possession game late. Absolutely have an opportunity to win this game, but Minnesota made plays down the stretch. I also thought Minnesota got really timely contributions out of Jordan McLaughlin. I thought Jaden McDaniel had a huge tip-in late in the game on a slash. Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a big basket. So they got their role players to have a timely bucket to take some of the pressure off an Anthony Edwards or Karl Anthony Towns. And that just wasn't the case on the other end of the floor. It was going to come down to 1 or 2 guys for OKC. They're 2 stars. Basically, we're going to have to make plays, and that just puts a lot of pressure on you to get it done.
McDaniels had 2 big, because he had a corner 3 with about 2 minutes to go. That was absolutely huge, and the tip in. So he had 2 big buckets. And to me, this is the whole thing about the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards, we'll talk about him in a second. I think as the games get more important and more intense, I just trust that he is going to channel the best version of himself as a scorer. You've got Karl Anthony Towns who's going to score a little bit. You're going to have Mike Conley facilitating, but they're so good defensively. You want to play them heavy minutes, but are they going to make the shots? Because their shots are going to be more or less the same, in my opinion. They're going to get kickouts. They're going to get slashes, and they just have to finish those at a high rate. And they didn't even finish those at a high rate overall. McDaniel 6 of 11 is really good, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker 4 of 12. But to your point, they were timely. For Nickeil Alexander-Walker in particular, it was fourth quarter buckets that he was getting. And to me, that's, if you're buying the Timberwolves, you're probably buying their ability to show up in big moments. And if you're selling them, you probably think they don't have enough offense because, outside of of Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, where is your consistent offense coming from? Naz Reid
You
off
know,
the bench.
I look at these two teams, Adam, and we're going to be talking about them all year. We have been, and we're going to continue to do that. They're going to be right there near the top of the West, and it is a fun matchup, and they play competitive games, man, and it's building into something, and I love what this is turning into. And I hope at some point we can get a 7-game series between these two teams. I don't know if that's going to work out that way because of the seeding.
Yeah.
Man, that would be fun to watch because I just love the matchups in this game. Now, when you start talking about like, who do you trust more? And look, it didn't work out this way last night, but who do you trust more offensively in a tight game between Shai and Anthony Edwards? And I think that's a big part of this conversation. And I typically tend to trust Shai more. I think he is more likely to get what he wants to get against anybody at that time in the game because he's amazing with his ability to control the basketball in tight space when he's crowded, and he still has control of the ball. And it just looks like it's right there for a defender to get a piece of, and they just don't because it's just that quick, that tight. He can go any which way you have to with the ball. And then from basically a stopped position, his ability then to burst whenever he wants to go to get into that gap. And you talked about it earlier, the way he manipulates the ball up and under guys to get these soft English type layups up on the glass. And then he's got this ultimate hammer, which is that pull up on a dime that is so quick and a little bit of a lean back to it. So you can't really contest it. Like that's his ultimate weapon because it's hard to get to the rim when you have to, particularly against this team with that kind of height back there. So you have to have then that other answer, which is that middle area of the floor. And he just gets to his spots. I love Anthony Edwards' talent. He's more of a 2 guard. He's not a point guard. His handle's not quite on the level of a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So he's going to kind of more pick a straight line dribble drive and go in that direction or stop and pull up or maybe shoot a step back 3. He's not going to have a counter to you cutting him off and then going to another move. Like that's where Shai is so tough. Even when you defend it well initially, he can stop, change hands, get you rocking again, and then go one direction to the other as a second move and still get where he wants to go. And that's why in a big spot with really tight defense being played on the perimeter, and you got to have something good here, I think I tend to trust Shai a little bit more. Doesn't necessarily mean like I trust their team overall more because I really like Minnesota too. But just those two guys, like deciding matters late, I think I have more faith that Shai is going to get something quality for himself or his team. How about you?
So I think if you told me that, I missed the game and you told me in a fourth quarter, Shai or Ant went for 17-point fourth quarter, I would believe those in equal measure for one game. If you told me over the course of a playoff run that one of them averaged, say, 14 points in the fourth quarter, I would believe it more for Shai. So I say that to say that Anthony Edwards, I think, can be at that level in any given game, and I would fear them just about the same in any one game. But Shai does it so effortlessly and so consistently and in a way that it seems like he has figured out every type of defender, that's why I would give him the edge. But I agree with your broader, what I think you were hinting at here, which is if I had to pick between the two teams, and I think there's reason. Look, I'm not saying this. I love both teams. I genuinely love both of these teams and watching them. Yeah. To the extent that I can root for them, I root for them. I think I buy Minnesota more because what they do defensively, I think, is just sustainable for a playoffs. It's sustainable for everything. I think that the Thunder have a weakness, and I've said it all year. They have a weakness with size, and this was another game where size, the two front court players, size played a factor in the game. And I think that is a thing that the Thunder are going to run into in the playoffs is they're going to see teams that say that's the vulnerability. We're going to try to bully them. You mentioned Chet not having a great game. I don't think it was an accident. There was a play in the fourth quarter where Gobert on a post move dunked it over Chet. Chet's a great defensive player. Rudy Gobert, not necessarily a great offensive player, and he just dunked through him like he was Shaq. And I think that's the thing that over time you're going to add guys to the roster. Chet's going to get a little bit better about how he defends that. But that's why as a team, I think I trust the Wolves more. They're both vulnerable, but the Wolves don't have that one weakness that I see that I say, man, I don't know if they can overcome it.
I think that's a fair analogy, a fair description. And I think also it's fair to say, do you think Oklahoma City has enough like on their bench? And with some of the inconsistent, spotty offense that you're going to get out of Giddey and Dort, like both of those
Right.
guys, like Giddey, even the threes he's making right now, it is not pretty, man. That is not a pretty looking release. It's surprising to me when it goes in, and it just seems like something's going on with him mechanically and with his confidence that he's deteriorated as an offensive player. He's not as impactful. I loved him also because he had the ball more, it felt like, when he was at his best, because he's such a great ball mover and he just makes
Right.
great reads and decisions. He makes everybody better. I just don't, I'm feeling his impact less and less. Dort, very, very streaky to have on the
6
floor. And
last
like
night.
there aren't a lot of teams left, Adam, in the league that have the guy that's primarily out as a perimeter player, that's primarily out there as a defender, that's not a pretty capable 3-point shooter. And like
Right.
Dort can make some, but he's so streaky. Is that enough to rely on when you get now into late into the year and you get into these postseason series and it's going to be right from the get-go, you're going to have a really good team in the first round. Do they have enough with these supplemental players? I think I like Minnesota, some of Minnesota's guys. I feel a little bit more like I can kind of rely on what they're going to give me every night. When you talk about McDaniels or you talk about even Kyle Anderson, like I kind of know what he's going to contribute to the game. Jordan McLaughlin's been terrific for them. Naz Reid has been terrific for them all year. I feel like I'm more sure about what I'm getting out of the guys that aren't the stars on Minnesota's team more so than Oklahoma City. And I wonder if you agree with that and if you think that's something that maybe they're looking at as they get to the trading deadline.
Well, I think this is the thing about the Thunder, right? And again, it's always great. This year, the first year where you ascend to one of the top teams is always great. But then I think as you go through it, and I really learned this with following Denver through their first championship, first time I ever covered a championship team. It's just different. Where in the regular season, your weaknesses, you notice them, but they're outshined by the things that you do so well. And I just think that is going to be the thing. The stuff you're talking about with the Thunder, those are things that I think are going to shine more and more in the playoffs. The fact that Giddey and Dort playing them together, teams are going to be prepared for that. It's going to be easier to guard, not easy, but easier to guard them when they say, okay, here's exactly how we want to force the ball into those guys' hands. And then your question about depth, it doesn't matter necessarily in number of guys. I think they're okay there, but it is in collection of guys. Do they have, if you play your 5 best guys, do you have a rotation behind that's going to make sense? So I'm with you. And I say all that to say that the Thunder are really good. They're going to cause problems for any team they face in the playoffs and have a chance to beat any team. But they also have a chance to lose, I think, to a lot of teams. And that's why, that's why I think it's interesting. By the way, same goes for the Timberwolves. But this was a win that it was impressive to me without Mike Conley, because I think Mike Conley is as important of a player for them and what they do as anyone on the roster. Not that he's their best, but he's the only true point guard. And the fact that they were able to handle the clutch last night without him is really impressive.
No, definitely, because he's the organizer. I mean, he's the guy, he's the stabilizer. And why he was so beneficial to pairing with a guy like Anthony Edwards is because, and I felt the same way when he went to Utah with Donovan Mitchell, because you're asking elite level, like raw scorers to now also initiate in those spots,
Right.
big moments. Now they're bringing the ball up the floor too.
Right.
And they're going to get that first ball screen. And like their tendency is to hunt a shot in that situation. So when Conley paired with Mitchell, I felt the same impact. I thought, man, it's going to make them better because now Conley can handle the ball initially, right? And absorb that pressure against the ball and control it, get it exactly where he needs to on the floor. And now Edwards or Mitchell, when he was in Utah, they can pop out, catch the ball in a much more advantageous spot with a live dribble. And it makes them more efficient as players. So I agree with you. Conley is critical to them because he's going to take some of that pressurized ball handling where the ball's got to get to a certain spot on the floor to run your offense, takes it out of the lap of guys that are more natural scorers. And that's why he's so critical.
Anthony Edwards, by the way, last night became the 3rd fastest player to reach 6,000 points. It was when I saw that stat come across, it was one of those things where I was reminded how young he is. And this happens from time to time because I think of him and Shai as the same age. Shai's 3 years older. Anthony Edwards just 22 years old. He does have some holes in his game, although I thought last night he didn't have it. Last night was a very good. Some of the things that bother me about his game last night, I thought he was great. Decision making in the clutch, aggressiveness in the clutch. He picked up a fine in the post game, upset about the foul call, which I think he probably woke up and regret. That was one of those ones where it was an intense game. You're feeling the emotions, and he's thinking, "Yeah, I'll take a $50,000 fine." And you wake up in the morning and go, "I didn't need that. That didn't do anything."
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I thought it was a reminder of the how good he is and the headway he has, the room he has to grow, the fact that he reached that milestone. Any parting thoughts on Anthony Edwards or on this game?
Oh, it's the thing that I will always say at the top of the list of reasons why I admire him is that he absolutely, it's obvious. He bleeds the fact that he wants to win.
Yeah.
He wants to win. He wants to compete. He wants to take on challenges of who he has to guard. He's got that look in his eye. He's got that intensity, and he is so young, and he's significantly better and more polished than he was when he came into the league. And just think about where he's going to be when he's 25 years old. And he's got some real seasoning under his belt. And he's gone through some playoff series maybe and been through some tough ones and late, maybe he gets to a 6-7 gamer and it doesn't go his way. Imagine how that's going to drive a guy like that with that much talent and that much want to. And then once he adds every year, continue to add to your game offensively, where he will be as he enters his prime, which for me, I've always considered to be 25 to about 31. Like those are your peak years when you're the strongest you'll be. You're the mentally toughest you'll be. You've already gotten paid, so you're not worried about that anymore. You've gotten accolades by that time. And the only thing you care about is getting better and leading your team to winning. I think that starts at about age 25. That's when he kicks in. So think about him 3 years from now, how good he's going to be if he wants it as bad as it appears to us that he does.
100%. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we're going to talk about the team with the number one net rating in the clutch, the number one defense in the clutch, and it might not be the team you think it is. So we'll get to that, as well as the Clippers snap their win streak in Cleveland in the return of Evan Mobley. So a lot of meat on the bone for those two games. But first, we are presented as always by DraftKings Sportsbook. The NBA is in full swing, and if you can't get enough of the action, spice things up with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Right now, new customers bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets, whether you win, whether you lose. Bet on anything. Make the dumbest bet of your life. Take the craziest odds. It doesn't matter. You're getting that $200 instantly in bonus bets when you use promo code ALLNBA. So download the app, use code ALLNBA, and take advantage of that deal. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 878-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 older, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/basketball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, I alluded to it. It was the debut of Doc Rivers last night with the Milwaukee Bucks. It happened on the road in Denver. What a debut, by the way. You take over a team, and your first game is on the road against the defending champs. Tough break for Doc Rivers. But he goes in. They made a couple of adjustments for going to this one, rotational adjustments. You saw some different plays, some different designs. But it was the Nuggets in the clutch that stepped up and got stops. I thought they were great defensively all game in this one. And in the clutch, they pulled away to get a 113-107 lead or win. What did you see from this game?
Well, first of all, this had high level playoff like intensity. I thought both teams really got after it. You think it's hard to be a player and get traded and show up that first game and go out there and have an impact. That's really hard, okay, to do, because your head is swirling, with what's going on. Your life is just turned upside down. You're in a new city. 3 days ago, you were living somewhere else. Your family probably got left behind. And now here you are showing up with guys you don't know. And go out there and have a great game. It's hard. It's even harder as a coach to have any kind of an impact right away. It just is. You haven't had any time to implement the stuff you want. You had very little time to go over what real change you want to make defensively with schemes and personnel and matchups, which has been a big problem for them. Some of it came down to play harder. And I thought they played hard in this game.
Yep.
And when I watch the Bucks, and Giannis, because of the way he plays, sometimes you watch them, you think, well, they're always playing hard because he always plays with that level of intensity. But I've watched the Bucks this year and felt like they were not giving full effort defensively. I thought they get into an outscore you mentality sometimes, and that worked against them. And they got away from like what their roots were when they were a champion, which was really get after you. And I thought they were closer in this game to doing that. Their turnovers actually led to some of Denver's open floor opportunities. It wasn't as much they weren't getting back after missed shots like I saw for most of this season. So they got 19 fast break points, Denver, but some of those, a good number of those were alpha of turnovers where they got out, they were able to run and get stuff in the open floor. So that's the first thing that stood out was I thought the Bucks played consistently hard for 48 minutes. Good things happen when you do that. And they were able to do it. And then from Denver's standpoint, I just felt like you get them in a one possession game late, last 5 minutes, which they had in this one. And the way that Jokic controls the game, two-man game, his reads off passes and some of the plays he made with his passing to beat Milwaukee when they defended it well. And then Jamal Murray reminded you that this guy can be a superstar when he needs to be a superstar. He has a gear, and you don't have to see it every night. They don't need it every night out of Jamal Murray. They needed every bit of it in this one. And he had 35 points, and he delivered in a big way, and he was absolutely sensational. And they didn't really have an answer for him more than anything else. I felt like that was the difference between the two teams.
Not an answer. Definitely was not Damian Lillard and Malik Beasley. And I'm not going to hammer this point home because I brought it up a couple times on the show throughout the episodes. But that's my biggest question mark with him, and you saw it last night. Jamal Murray was unbothered yesterday. All throughout the game, but especially in the clutch, when you got down and you say, okay, the teams are especially locked in, the game's in the balance, he still got what he wanted. And when he didn't get the things they wanted out of just pick and roll or what have you, he could just get to his, okay, I'm going to try to isolate this guy. And he got great shots every time, was very comfortable in that matchup. And the Bucks in this game, you see what their strategy is going to be in the playoffs. Even if they replace Malik Beasley and get an upgrade at the trade deadline at shooting guard, teams are still going to target Damian Lillard in the pick and roll. Denver did it all game, last night. And I thought the Bucks did a great job of scram switching behind him to get him off. Like they would get Jokic switched, Dame switched out onto Jokic, and they would very quickly switch off of it. Denver tried to get a lob late, try to beat them on the switch and get the lob. But that is going to be a challenge. And Bucks, I thought, did as good a job as you can expect of handling that. But in a playoffs, you're going to see that, 20 times in the fourth quarter where a team gets Dame switched out onto the matchup they want, and the Bucks are going to have to be quick behind them. But your point here, the one that's most interesting to me, last year, the reason I believed in the Nuggets was they were the number 3 defense in the clutch. And I know that the clutch numbers can be a little wonky. You shouldn't fully buy them. But when I watched them, it matched the numbers, which said they lock in on defense and they are an elite defensive team, like when they put the effort. You see that this year as well. Denver in the clutch is number 1 defensively. And when you watch games like last night, it doesn't feel like, oh, that must be shooting luck or this or that. They take it up a notch. They get steals. They use their length. And Jokic in particular, who is the guy that I think is the key to their defense, he just does such a good job of making everything as hard as possible. So Denver in the clutch this year has just been really impressive, and this was Exhibit A.
Absolutely. And they and they get it from different places. Aaron Gordon had a huge play in this game, tracking Lillard to the rim with a block late. Peyton Watson had a big steal. His length is definitely something they've incorporated into their defensive plan. So yeah, they're just, you know what it is? I think more than anything, Adam, I don't know necessarily I look at them and go, wow, like that is elite level athletic defensive personnel they throw at you. They're just so smart. They're so smart. They don't blow communications and coverages. They don't, like you saw Milwaukee even late in that game when Denver was running high ball screen and Milwaukee was like confused about how they wanted to play that. Dude, you want to switch it? Are we going to go under? Like, especially when Lillard's involved because they're trying to protect him to such an extent that now he's like trying to like hedge for a second and then fly back to his guy. And like, you get 2 guys in one spot. Denver doesn't make those mistakes. They just don't make them. And look, part of it is continuity. You've been together, this core, been together this long now. You can definitely, be on a string because you almost can read each other's minds in that situation. And Jokic is a great communicator as the anchor and the captain. And like, he's the guy seeing everything because he's the guy coming out, his guy setting a lot of screens. they just don't make mistakes in coverages, and you're going to earn it. You're going to have to earn it. You're not going to get something cheap against them when it matters. And I thought that was another example of it last night. Another thing that stood out to me, I just mentioned Lillard and Gordon, the block that he made on Gordon made the block of Lillard late, big play. But Lillard makes 2 free throws in this game with 5:48 left in the game. That made it a 2-point game. And he took one more shot. He took one more shot.
Yeah. He wasn't getting a lot of shots in general. 13 just overall in the game.
It was strange to me the way they were running their offense. He wasn't really the guy that was initiating, and this Dame time thing is like, that's what they got him for. And like, here you are, this moment. And Giannis, of course, was his normal relentless self, and he was doing his thing. But Lillard was super quiet in the last 5.5 minutes of the game. And some of it, when he did try to get aggressive, Gordon makes a great play. But other than that, he wasn't really involved in initiating offense or like, so I thought that was kind of different. I'm really curious to see what the Bucks think about it when they go look at the film and they wonder, like, well, wait a second. This is one of the main reasons we got him, to take some of this off of Giannis's plate, especially in tight games. And he was nowhere to be found. And I'd like to maybe go back and watch those possessions again and see what was the reason for that. Was it something Denver was doing? Were they denying him the ball?
I think so. I think so. And I'm going to have to give a little credit here to KCP. All year, the Nuggets have been calling him first team. That's his nickname. Anytime he's referenced in a presser or anything like that, they just say, oh yeah, that was first team. First team did this. There's been a lot of games this year where great scoring guards have had well below their averages, not just on points, but on attempts. And that's what you saw last night. So I think KCP deserves a lot of credit. But Denver had the ability last night to have KCP spend a lot of minutes on him. They had Aaron Gordon, who would switch out on him a lot and spend some minutes on him. And then Peyton Watson, who is rapidly becoming one of those names you need to know, because in the playoffs, he is going to be the X factor for the Denver Nuggets. But he has games, and I thought last night he had one. He guarded Giannis for possessions, didn't do a great job because, let's be honest, Giannis is just too big and strong, and that was his first time matching up with him. That was a lesson. But I thought the minutes he was on Damian Lillard, whether it was off switches or just Denver put him in at shooting guard. He's 6'8". They put him in at shooting guard for a stint there, and he just did a great job. So I thought that Lillard didn't have a single pocket in this game where he got a matchup where you thought, okay, he could do something with it. Denver was focused on him. And if you look at the shot distribution in this game, 19 for Giannis, but then Lillard took the same amount of shots as Brook Lopez. Middleton got 10 shots in this one. Beasley gets 9. Bobby Portis gets 13. I thought Denver did a great job of packing the paint and forcing other guys to take to contested, run them off the line three-pointers. And I think it was 26 points in the paint they had. They averaged 50. They had 26 points in the paint last night. I just thought Denver's defensive scheme, game plan, and execution was on point.
Well, if that's all true, and I have no reason to doubt you watch Denver every single night. Nobody knows more about them than you do. That's concerning, because you might have been looking at a finals matchup.
Could be.
That's very possible. I mean, I think all of us agree we would give the nod to Boston right now. We think Boston's a more complete team, but look, you gotta now wait and see the impact that Doc Rivers could potentially have on this group. Right. And see if he tightens things up to such an extent, and you still have those two players and a pretty darn good third option in Middleton, like and Lopez, and like, do you have great role players around them? Like, that's a team potentially makes a finals run, especially if Doc has the kind of impact to clean up that 10 or 15% that you're trying to trim the fat off of what you've seen this year. And that's what they brought in Doc Rivers to do. He's not reinventing anything. Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo are going to look very similar to the way they've looked all year offensively under Adrian Griffin. That's not what Doc's there to do. He's there to tweak things, tweak the rotation, get more out of them by making them accountable defensively. And if he can do that, you may have been looking at a finals preview last night. And if that's the case, what you're saying about Denver and the impact they had from a personnel standpoint and a scheme standpoint on Damian Lillard, that's got to be concerning for the Bucks.
The last thing I have here is I'm curious what you think. Is there pressure on Doc Rivers? They fire Adrian Griffin, and then the Bucks have lost 2 of the last 3 since that happened. It happens. You play at Denver, you're supposed to lose that game. The other one was to Cleveland, who's obviously been on a roll. But is there a pressure, not just like the long-term vision? 'Cause I know everybody says Milwaukee, they're not worried about the regular season. This is the long-term view. But they have 4 more games on a road trip, right? So Doc enters on a 5-game road trip. Is there pressure that if you go 2-3 in your first handful of games, with Doc Rivers, is there an added pressure that then all of a sudden comes to, oh, what did you do? You messed with the good thing. Do you think that's an X factor here?
I don't. I don't think one person on the planet is going to think that. I really don't. I think, and this is honestly, this is not disrespectful to Adrian Griffin at all. I thought everything that happened to him was unfair. There's no other word to put it. It was unfair, and sometimes life is unfair, but it's also probably in the best interest of the Milwaukee Bucks to do it. And I think everybody kind of agrees with that. I think they looked around at the teams that you're going to have to compete with to make a legitimate title run. And you don't get Lillard unless you think you're winning it this year and every year that you have these two guys paired, right? And you look at what you have to go against. And you look at, Nick Nurse in Philadelphia. You look at Mazzulla, who's a young guy, and he got questioned a lot last year with some of his decision-making in year 1. But guess what? He's already been through a postseason with those guys. This is year 2 now. He's a lot more comfortable. And by all accounts, that's probably the most talented starting 5 in the league. And so, they're in a good spot. You look out west and some of the Mike Malone coaching the Denver Nuggets, and you look at Frank Vogel coaching Phoenix and Ty Lue coaching the Clippers, and they look at, we went this route with a first-year coach. And is that the smartest thing to do here? And so they switched it up. So I don't think anybody, no matter how this starts off initially, now, look, you said 2-3 in the rest of this road trip, whatever. Okay. 8-10, 18 games from now? Yeah, now you got a different conversation. But right off the bat, you're not going to hear any questioning of this move initially, because Doc, you might even drop games while you're trying to figure this out. It's a very tough thing to do, to come on the fly and be a coach and manage people. It's like I said, it's hard as a player. It's easier though, because at least it's just basketball, man. I'm going to go make plays. If I get the ball, I'm going to go do my thing, hopefully, and get opportunities. As a coach, it's very difficult. You're coming to manage a group of people and all your ideas now, and they've been doing things differently for the last few months. And you come in and you might change things overnight that are going to affect guys dramatically, potentially. So give them time. I don't think anybody's going to question it, no matter how they start out. The one thing that was encouraging last night, mostly from that game, they played hard. They played with the level of intensity that's appropriate for trying to win a championship. And I can't say that I felt that way about them all year, particularly defensively. I thought it was better last night.
Yeah. The last game we're going to move on to, the Cavs and the Clippers win streak. They get a very impressive win at home against the Clippers, 118-108. And the top story, at least for me, Evan Mobley is back. He played 21 minutes. He did not close in this game, but he had 10 points, 9 rebounds in his 21 minutes. He returns to the team, and they pick up a win. What stood out to you about this one?
Well, now 10 out of their last 11. They've beaten Milwaukee twice. They beat the Clippers. They beat the Magic, which is a quality win. The beginning of this, not so great. They had a win against Dallas, too, along the road. So they've got some really good wins. What's impressive to me about Cleveland is they're one of those teams that can beat you multiple ways. They can shoot. They can shoot you out from the three-point line on a given night, and their role players stepped up big for them. Last night, they had some really big, important shots in this fourth quarter of that game from the role players from the three-point line. They can beat you with length and size, with Jared Allen and Mobley and the things that they can do in the paint around the rim. They can beat you with an individual ISO-type player in Donovan Mitchell who can go off at times when he needs to. And then they can beat you with really competitive, hard-nosed defense, which I thought was the main story last night. Because I thought the Clippers were really – they came to play, and Cleveland never really allowed them to get into a great rhythm. They're very impressive, man. And you can't deny it now. Cleveland's in the discussion. They're going to be part of the narrative now going forward the rest of the year. And think about it. And they said it on the broadcast last night. I don't know how close Garland is to coming back, but I think he's been out for like 6 weeks. I mean, you're talking about a point guard that is an all-star in this league, and you've been playing without him. And that's just going to be more firepower when he joins the mix. And it'll be an acclimation period because it's different when it's a point guard and he's got the ball, right? That's going to be different. But Mobley's been out. Garland's been out. And yet here they are, 10 out of 11, and they're climbing the charts in the Eastern Conference, and they're in the mix, man. It's they've been very impressive, and they were again last night against a really hot Clippers team that was frustrated offensively. They could not get it going outside of Kawhi.
And including in the clutch. And you just mentioned the standings. We'll get to it in a second. They're only a game and a half out of the 2 seed. I don't think most people off the top of their head would have known that, that they were that close. But my note on this game was that the Cavs' fourth quarter bench unit was phenomenal. So you get into the fourth quarter, do you think, okay, the Clippers are really deadly here. They know what they do. It's hard to guard. But they got big-time stops and moved the ball extremely well and knocked down open shots. That's Niang, that's Strus, that's Dean Wade. Mobley was in there for a stint. The setting the tone for the fourth quarter, you close last 8 minutes, teams will go 6-7 minutes, they'll go to their closing lineups. But the setup to that, before that, when you go to some of the staggered lineup for the Clippers features James Harden, superstar. You had Russell Westbrook on the court. You had Norman Powell on the court. On the other end, it was Niang, it was Strus, it was Dean Wade, and those guys I just thought had a really impressive 5-minute stretch that opened up this game. And they did it, to your point, about winning different ways. They did it calm and just through moving the ball and getting the ball popping and finding guys. And that's what stood out to me about this one.
Absolutely. They are at their best. I love watching the Cavs when they go dribble, drive, kick, and they make you chase it around the perimeter. And they've got a number of guys towed up, ready to shoot it. And if you defend that well enough, you can always end a possession by giving the ball to a guy like Mitchell, who can get off a good shot pretty much anytime he wants to because of the way he elevates from deep. And they're not always going to necessarily be super high percentage shots, but he's going to get you something good at the end of a clock, even if you defend them well. And you also have to defend these dives by these bigs. Allen diving and running right to the rim, and you lob it up for him, or puts him in a great position for offensive rebounding. Same thing with Mobley. Like, they're so long on these pick and dives, and then you also have to worry about getting out to the 3-point line because of the number of guys they have that can catch and shoot. They're just really fun. They're a good team to watch. They weren't very good early. People were wondering what was wrong with them, and I think some of it had to do with personnel being out, and some of it just whatever reason they got out of the gate a little bit slowly. But, man, they're rolling now, and you can't deny their impact in the Eastern Conference. They are right there in the mix, and they keep this up from now to the All-Star break. They continue to win at this rate. Who knows? They might be the 2 seed by the time we get there. Certainly they're going to be a team that you're now going to say, man, that's going to be a really tough series for Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, anybody that would have to play the Cavs in the second round.
I want to get to that. 1 second. My one last thought here is that Donovan Mitchell, I feel like he is a type of player that is best when everything goes around him. The ball is in his hands. You give him a lot of spacing, and you just kind of let him do his thing, and he's obviously very good at it. Because of, I'm sure, minutes restriction and Mobley's just back, he didn't play a lot after that first stint. You kind of just went to the Jared Allen, the lineup that's been winning, quite frankly, since Mobley went out, and they've been on this hot streak. And you go to that. And look, he's just back. You're going to ease him back into the rotation, into the lineup. But that is one of the questions I have is, are they going to have not a controversy, but are they going to be comfortable with what is their best look in the clutch? And is it both bigs? Is it only one big? Is it through Donovan Mitchell exclusively? Are you trying to get other guys involved? And then obviously if Garland comes back, then how do you work that into it? So I think that they're a team that they're winning in a way that they're probably not going to be going to here down the stretch. And I'm just very curious to see if they lose any momentum as they reintegrate Mobley.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that would help them a lot, and it's not going to happen here on the fly, and especially, just it's midseason, and you can see what it looks like, and he's missed time. Mobley's ability eventually to extend out to the 3-point line.
Yeah.
If he can do that offensively, you got a real problem on your hands now with this team, because I think the length defensively, guys, he's good at jumping out, sliding his feet. He does more than an adequate job when he has to switch out and guard perimeter players with his length. And if he does get beat, he can track him from behind, or you've got Allen back there as help. So I don't think defensively it's nearly the problem that it is for them offensively at times.
Right.
If Mobley can, and right now, he shoots at a 20% clip all 3 years in the league. He's been in the 20s. He just doesn't take many. He hasn't really added that to his game. I thought, looking at his stroke in college, it would translate to that by here in the third year. Like he would have extended that. I don't think doesn't look like to me he's put a ton of time in trying to add that. that would make them a really, really difficult team to defend on that end of the floor. And then you have all the benefit, I think, of what you can get playing both bigs defensively.
So you talk about the standings. Right now, the Milwaukee Bucks are second in the Eastern Conference at 32-15. The losses are the number I always look at, 15 losses. The 76ers have 16, the Cavs have 16, and the Knicks have 17. Those teams are all separated by basically a game and a half. That is really, really tight in those standings. And I look at it and I think we've kind of penciled in Boston, Milwaukee, and the 76ers 1, 2, 3. But the 76ers now tied with the Cavs. The Knicks are surging 8-2 for the Knicks, 9-1 in the last 10 for the Cavs. Meanwhile, the 76ers just 6-4. Obviously, Embiid's been out a couple of games there. Have you rethought at all? Do you look at this? I just asked about the Bucks, and if they go on a losing streak, you said nobody's going to think that, but you might think it if they fall to the 6th seed, just by virtue of they're only one game up. So, you fall to the 6th seed, it's going to feel like something bigger. Do you think that those stand? Would you be surprised if the Knicks and Cavs somehow overtake the 76ers and Bucks down the stretch?
Would not be shocked, particularly with Cleveland. And I just pulled this up because I was curious to see. I hadn't looked ahead to their schedule. My goodness, listen to this schedule between now and the All-Star break, and you might be onto something here. They might be too, because they play Detroit, at Memphis, at San Antonio,
okay,
Sacramento at home, at Washington,
wow,
at Brooklyn,
wow,
at Toronto. Okay, and then they finally get Philadelphia, Chicago, both at home, right before the All-Star break. You're not going to find a softer spot in your schedule all year long than what Cleveland has coming up, and they're already this hot. And by the way, if Garland does come back, they said soon, and again, I don't know the time frame. I don't know if that's imminent, but if he does come back during this stretch, perfect time to implement him against in a stretch of games you're supposed to win, where you can kind of let him get a feel for the game again when you're not playing murderer's row of all the juggernauts in the league. You know what I mean? When you want games you really want to win, you're going to win these games by showing up and playing hard against these teams. So their schedule right now lends itself. They've won 10 out of 11. Let's say conservatively, that's 9 games I just mentioned. Let's say they go 7-2, man, between now and then, 8-1, something like that. Now you're talking about, 17 or 18 out of 20 games going into the All-Star break, and you probably are sitting there maybe in the 2 spot by the time you get there. That's what we're looking at for Cleveland right now.
I think that's exciting. The Knicks also obviously playing well, so I just like it because it felt like we had these tiers. Even in the West, if you look at it, the Clippers were not in the tier, then they vaulted up to it. So we're seeing a little bit of movement that's making us rethink the standings and the order of things, and I think that's great. Let's speed run through the rest of these games real quick. The Knicks beat the Hornets 113-92. They continue to play extremely well. That was a good team versus a bad team matchup. I don't really have any thoughts or notes on that one. The Celtics got a win at home against the Pelicans. It was a close game. They needed a huge fourth quarter comeback. But the Celtics went from undefeated at home to dropping 2 games, the Nuggets and obviously the Clippers, and almost a third one to the Pelicans. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
No, I mean, I think the key is that what you said is that they didn't allow that to happen. They outscored them by 12 in the fourth, put up a big number scoring wise in the fourth, hit them with a barrage. And I think it's important that they stalled that little skid at home. I mean, you're talking about two really good teams that beat you at home. No shame in that. But my goodness, I mean, those are the games that you really need home court advantage. Like, that's why you play for it, and you lose to those 2 teams. Now you lose to a good Pelicans team, not a great one. Now you start to lose a little bit of that mystique in that building. So they were able to kind of come back and answer the bell and right the ship at home.
The Nets beat the Jazz 147-114. This is a bit of a surprise win since the Nets had been reeling, but the story was the return of Ben Simmons. Comes back, and listen to this one, Legs, puts up a stat line in just 18 minutes of 10 points, 8 rebounds, 11 assists, a steal, a block, and a plus 27 in 18 minutes. What do you think of that for Ben Simmons?
All right. Well, listen, I don't want to rain on Ben's parade.
Oh, no.
Been out a while. He's been out a while. And so I'm going to cut him a break today, man. I'm going to cut him a break today. I've been hard on Ben Simmons, justifiably so, in my opinion.
Of course.
Most importantly, I think here's the most important thing that you left out in the 18 minutes and that stat line in a plus 27. First of all, they won by 33 games. So like everybody was a plus 27 pretty much. Okay.
Yeah,
But here's the important number, the most important number, 5 field goal attempts.
yeah.
He shot the ball 5 times and he made all 5. So,
Right.
and I don't care if they're all layups or little paint jump hooks or whatever. I don't care. But you have to be a factor when you look at taking advantage of driving lanes and gaps when you're 6'10" with that kind of athletic ability and speed. And that's the right play to make to put pressure on the defense, and it's there for you. And you can't worry about getting fouled. I've given up on ever thinking this guy's going to shoot jumpers. He's never going to he's never going to do it, obviously, by now. But that doesn't mean you can't be effective as a player when you take advantage of the opportunities that are clearly presented to you as a driver. And that is where he had gone completely off the rails. Like, he stopped looking at the basket altogether. It's impossible to function offensively if you have a player on the court that is acting that way, particularly when it's a ball handler and it's a primary decision maker. So that's a good sign. He took 5 shots, converted all 5. That's a normal night for him, and that's what we're going to look at going forward for them. Look, you can't deny that's a ridiculous level of production in those minutes. I don't care who you are or what league you're playing in. That's outrageous, so give him credit. First game back, he has that kind of an impact. Let's continue to watch his normal thought process on the offensive end of the floor and see if that continues to evolve.
The Suns smacked the Heat last night, 118-105. The Heat, a little bit of a tailspin here over this last little bit. We didn't catch this game, of course. We talked about the 3 games we did watch, but you can just look at the standings and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 game losing streak for the Miami Heat, including winless since making the big Terry Rozier trade. Are they in trouble?
Well, I think you're so kind to say a little bit of a tailspin. That was a very, very nice way to put that. Very euphemistic way of describing what they're going through right now. It's crazy, man. Like, so they made a pretty, I thought, important trade. And this is a very small sample size, but it looks like they've won a game since they got him.
No.
Since they got Rozier, right? So they're trying to figure that out. The problem right now is they can't score. They're having such a hard time scoring. And Jimmy Butler, last night was pretty good. He got to the line a lot. And the game before that, he played pretty well. But prior to that, he had a stretch of games at the start of this losing streak where he's like in, the low teens most nights. And they're just counting on him to be better than that, the way that their offense operates. So their issue is they can't score. Now, look, they're playing some pretty good teams. Boston, New York, Phoenix. It's 3 in a row. But the first 4 of the losing streak are Toronto, Atlanta, Orlando, and Memphis. So those are games you shouldn't be going 0-4 in those games. So they got a lot going on right now, Adam. And I think there's going to be a lot more attention paid to them now and scrutiny looking at them. And I'm sure now as we head up here the last couple of weeks before the trading deadline, they're got to be looking at all kinds of stuff. If they're looking at their offense is just not flowing the way that they want it to, let's take a look at the Heat. But I'm going to be watching them more carefully going forward to see exactly what is going on with their offense, that they're having games where they're having a hard time getting to 100 points in a league when 120 is pretty much the norm.
Well, some of it has been Rozier has been off, but last night he wasn't, and they get blown out anyway. Their schedule, by the way, opposite of Cavs. They have Washington and San Antonio in the, here between now and the All-Star break. But outside of that, it's Sacramento, it's the Clippers, it's the Magic, it's the Celtics, Bucks, and 76ers. All the top teams they face in between now and the All-Star break. So the tailspin might continue for them. Elsewhere, the Dallas Mavericks picked up a win over the Magic. This was a very good game. They almost blew it to the Magic. They had this game in the bag. The Magic come back. There was a phenomenal Banchero gets it. They're down 2 points, and he's shooting free throws. He makes the first, or they're down 3, he makes the first one, and he executes the off the rim. Have you ever tried this, by the way, legs, where you chest past it off the front of the rim, and you have to hit it just perfect? It's almost like a carnival game to get it. Banchero did it as good as I've ever seen it executed. Have you ever tried this?
Not that way. I got myself a little pat on the back. I was really good at taking my normal shooting motion and turning it into a line drive and hitting the front of the rim. Really, really, really good at that to get it to come back. Now, I hated being in that spot because I'm like, dude, part of my contract negotiation is my free throw percentage. So, you're asking me to do something here. It's very uncomfortable for me, man. Like these numbers are like, that's what goes on the table when you slide that paper across when you're looking at a deal. I'm
that's incredible.
I was in that situation a few times in my career, and I was just good at that. I accurately could throw that thing as a dart and hit the front of the rim and have it come back as a long rebound. So no, I didn't, and I didn't see this play you're talking about, but he basically just saying threw it from his chest two-handed.
I'll have to go back and look because now that you mention it, he might have done what you're saying, the shot. Off the top of my head, I just know he threw it about 60 miles per hour right off the front of the rim, and it bounces all the way back. It actually bounced beyond the three-point line right to Franz Wagner, who there wasn't enough time. He had to catch and shoot a fall-away spinning three-pointer. But nonetheless, it was a very well-executed, off the rim. I feel like 9 times out of 10 guys try that, they miss the rim entirely, and it becomes a violation. But he pulled it off. After the game, though, we had a very interesting quote from Jayson Kidd. Do you have it for us, producer Emma? He said, he's better than Dirk. He's in the atmosphere of MJ, the best ever to do it, LeBron, Kobe. And so just to appreciate what this young man is doing at the age of 24 is something that Dallas has never seen. And this internally, he is better than Dirk. He does things that there could... Man, there's some typos, I think, in this one. And now the opportunity of getting the right people around him to ultimately win a championship. The big quote in here is that he's better than Dirk. He says it 2 times. You had an issue with this one.
Well, I didn't have an issue as much with him saying that he's better than Dirk. He is a better offensive talent than Dirk Nowitzki because of the component of the ball handling and passing. I mean, Dirk was an absolute beast as a raw scorer. And as a shooter, as a big shooter, like kind of like one of a kind, but as an all around offensive talent and just a dominant force. Yeah. I think that's fair to say that about Luka, but when you start throwing out names like LeBron and Kobe and MJ, okay, and you want to put him in that category. No, if you want to say at this stage of his career, like I think he's tracking to a place where one day he can maybe be, included in a sentence with some of these guys and say their names. Even then, I probably have a little bit of a problem. But you can't say what you said. He's not in that. You can't put him in that sentence because those guys have 15 rings collectively. And I know Luka's a young player, and maybe he gets there. But let's let him. Can we get him to a finals first? Can we get him to a ring first? And here's the biggest problem I have with it, Adam. All 3 of those guys he mentioned, absolutely laid it on the line defensively. And all 3 of those guys, Jordan won Defensive Player of the Year. I'm kind of surprised LeBron, I don't think, ever did. Kobe clearly was in that category multiple times, first league, all defense. All 3 of those guys could make a claim to being Defensive Player of the Year for a stretch of years at their best defensively. And the extent to which they affected the game on that end of the floor, that is where Luka's miles from those guys. And so I hear what Jayson Kidd is saying. He's just talking about as a raw talent. And Luka is special. There is no question. He might be the most dominant offensive player in the league right now, the most unstoppable offensive force in the league. When you start taking a leap and including him in sentences like that, and he's in a category with those players that played both ends and have won 15 rings collectively, I think you're taking it too far.
Now, just to clarify, because I know we're going to get the chatters, we had them yesterday. Why do you hate Luka Doncic so much, Tim Legler? Why is it you hate this guy? What is it you have against him?
I love Luka. Come on, I love Luka. But here's the thing, and you and I were talking about it before the show. Here's the problem. If you're a fan of a player, you're irrational. Yeah. You don't honestly accept players' warts. You just don't. And I feel like I really try to be super subjective about these guys, man. I don't have a bone to pick. I don't have a rooting interest. I'm not losing sleep if the Mavs lose a game. You know what I mean? I just cover the whole league and I say it like it is. And he has things he has to get better at. I think he's got to be a better leader. I think he's got to commit to more effort defensively. He's never going to be a stopper, but he has to show his teammates that he is willing to compete a little bit more on that end of the floor. There's no denying what this guy is capable of offensively. And we've seen it, man. We saw even what he did in series by himself practically and what he did to some of these teams. and what he did in the Phoenix series, what he did in the Game 7 on the road, and the embarrassment that he gave the Phoenix Suns. We know how great he is. I'm not denying it, man. I love the guy. But if you're a fan of him, some of you people are just irrational. You're irrational. You don't look at things honestly and say that's a good point. And yeah, okay, that's some area he can improve. We're not out here bashing Luka Doncic or hating on Luka. We admire him for the talent he is. I'm trying to help the guy figure out a way to give that extra 10% and actually get the Mavericks to a place where they can contend for a championship. Because until he does that, he's not going to cement his legacy as an all-time great. He's just not. You have to have that on your resume, that you were in the finals, that you won a championship. You have to have it. And look, maybe they're not good enough to do it right now. And he's only 24. Maybe that comes, maybe it doesn't. But let's not prematurely put him in a category with Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Kobe Bryant. That's all I'm saying. Like let's pump the brakes a little bit on some of the comparisons.
All right, hit that outro music, Emma. I love the point. And again, you're right about fans, and that's what makes sports so great, is you're a little irrational. But the other thing that makes sports great is that to win, almost always do you have to do something that you traditionally has been the hardest thing for you. Me following Jokic my whole life, the Suns swept him the year Jamal Murray was out. He has to come back. He has to average a 30-point triple-double to get over that series. Anthony Davis dominated him in the bubble. He had to come back and beat the Lakers and outperform Anthony Davis head-to-head. And then you talk about winning with defense. Jokic, not known as a great defender, they close out that series with 89 points in the Game 5. They win a game that was a defensive slugfest because he had made himself better on that end. Luka Doncic has a chance, in my opinion, to go down as one of, if not, he's still in the conversation for one of the greatest all time. He can get there, but he's not there because he's going to have to do the things you're talking about, and that's what you're highlighting out. In a lot of ways.
I want to finish. I got to get this last point in. I said this about Luka Doncic halfway through his rookie year. This is a statement I made, and I still believe this. I said, you're looking at a player that is going to be a multiple-time MVP and a multiple-time NBA champion. That's what I said his rookie year because of how, and I still believe that, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay, with the hyperbole. Those things have to happen first. He's tracking in that direction. Individually, certainly he's talented enough. Now, let's see the team success comes with it because none of these stuff's going to matter if they don't get that. And I still agree with the statement I made. I think he will get there in both categories. He'll win MVPs and he's going to win championships.
Yeah. We forgot a super chat. Let's get to it real quick, Legs. We've only got about 30 seconds. My question is, what is the Knicks' ceiling if they get themselves a spark plug off the bench like Brogdon and then get Mitch Robb back come playoffs? What is their ceiling?
Man, you say, first of all, I think even without doing that, you just get Randall back healthy, they're a contender. I mean, I literally genuinely think that they can absolutely give any of those teams nightmares in a 7-game series because they just consistently play harder than everybody they play against. And they've got a star offensive player. If you add pieces to the mix like you're talking about, you get Mitchell Robinson back and you add a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, absolutely they're a team that you've got to consider that could potentially win the Eastern Conference.
There you guys have it. Great buzzer, the final buzzer. Great one. Legs, thanks so much. Everybody, hit that like button for us on the way out. We'll see you Thursday.
We all silly like the mayor.